Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. All right, Nick, welcome. How's it going?
Ciao, Jack. What's great? How are you doing?
Very good, very good. So welcome everyone to the Week in Italian Startup. Let's dive immediately into the biggest deal of the week, I would say. Unguess, a crowd testing startup raising 10 million in a round led by FITEC. So I found there are a few interesting points in this deal, starting from what Unguess is doing. So Unguess has been around since 2015. The growth in terms of revenue of the company has been pretty interesting. I believe also that, it's a sign that, it's a good combination between tech, manpower, intellectual power to the service of actually making better product and better UX experience. So the crowd testing part is really fascinating, and it's here to stay for sure.
Yeah, agree. I think they took a sweet spot in terms of timing and positioning for the platform. I mean, probably in 2015, 2014, 2016, crowds, whatever, was quite fashionable. But they managed to pick an interesting position, and the team is very strong. So they managed to develop the company in probably market conditions that weren't so exciting back then, 2015, 2016, in particular in terms of funding available for startups in Italy.
Oh, yeah.
So this 10 million round is a good proof that they've been doing quite well, growing also internationally. So very, very good for them, very good for the ecosystem.
Yeah, and a few other points about the company, and then we move to the investor. So the company based, the revenue I found was basically in 2021, the revenue was about 2.6 million. And it's been at least 2 to 3 years that they doubled revenues. So it's a very, very solid sign. And on top of that, of course, all the services have been expanding. So it's not only crowd testing for UX, but it's also for CX, which is a broader term, customer experience, and not only UX experience, and then also debugging for websites. So the guys have been really providing a spectrum of products, so that definitely justifies a lot of the great growth. So super excited about this kind of tools for sure. In terms of the investor, I was checking out FITEC, exactly how exactly the structure was. So the head of FITEC is basically the Fondo Italiano, which is interesting because it's one of the few later stage funds in Italy. By later stage, I mean kind of Series B-ish, I would say. And Fondo Italiano has been supporting not only digital companies, but also other kinds of innovative small and medium enterprise.
Yep. Yeah, I would add to that Forno Italiano is not only a VC investment firm, it's a private equity firm.
Correct.
They originally mentioned the very first, I believe, in the 2010s, the very first fund of funds for VC in Italy, that it was migrated into CDP venture capital afterwards. They operate in the private equity space, and they have this late stage venture capital fund operating right now. I think they made quite a few investments so far. Less than 10, fewer than 10, but they completed a few operations. So good to have an investor in that space.
Yeah, so Fondo Italiano basically has multiple funds. I think FITEC has about 8 investments in their portfolio, 8 or 9, completely correct. And what is interesting is that within the Fondo Italiano ecosystem, you also have 2 interesting banks, which is Unicredit and Intesa. And those are generally the banks that are really pushing a lot of innovation in Italy. So it's very helpful to keep in mind that the banking part is still, together with CDP, is still a big part of the ecosystem for sure. Interesting. All right, moving on then. Let's mention MgShell, biotech startup raising 500K from Biosline Holding and business angels. We're not expert in biotech in general, me and you, Nick, but it's worth mentioning that the ecosystem is very much sensitive to these kind of deals, especially angel clubs. Angel clubs are working really, really fast on early stage biotech deals, including Club degli Investitori and Italian Angels for Biotech, among the other. So it's a very positive sign. It's a very direct sort of direction, but it's worth mentioning because more and more deals every year, they come up from these kind of sources and are funded by this kind of organization.
Yeah. Yeah, the two of us are not very into biotech, but let's not forget that we said it already. Italy has a strong history in terms of biotech companies. So it's not surprising that there are a few business angels, there are a few organizations investing in the space because there have been successful case histories in the market in Italy. So we are stronger than it appears on that vertical. Yep. NMG is another example of very early stage startup starting to operate. So it's another example of very vertical, very specific niches that are being addressed today with new therapies. In this case, I think a specific therapy for in the ophthalmology space, the eyes, I believe, yes. So that's another interesting point. So I'm always surprised by how niche they're going with these specific approaches. But very good.
Awesome. All right. Ener2Crowd, the crowdfunding platform for energy projects, raised 1 million from Business Angel. Okay, so basically here there are a few interesting points also. So essentially all the micro lending space has been evolving into different shapes across the different years. This took a very interesting turn when basically Ener2Crowd started doing micro lending exclusively from very specific kind of energy investments, so solar and other kind of initiative like that. So essentially, private retail investor can go on the platform, they can invest in sustainable and green projects, mostly related to energy and solar. And basically you can get a return in 24 to 48 months, and the average is 6.6% of those investments. So not too bad actually, and greatly helpful for the people working in the space, given the lack of financing opportunity from the traditional sources. So I thought it was a very unique way to dress up, a certain. It's a different flavor of micro lending. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The last one was the crowd, whatever week it appears. Anyhow, I also believe that they got a good timing in terms of what they developed. I mean, renewable energies today in these market conditions, so it's like a no-brainer. So I'm not surprised that they managed to raise this late seed round. And I agree with you. So it's an interesting way to being exposed to this asset class that was, only something that banks or more professional investors could get access to. I have to say, I also, back when I met them a few years back, the team is very young and very good. I tried the platform, so I got probably one investment still ongoing on the platform. Yes, so not too bad. It's been working so far.
It's been working. Nice return.
Not investment advice.
Nothing to complain. Not financial advice though, guys.
It works. I can say it works.
Awesome. The problem that I see here is probably just to break some eggs. Actually, is two main problems I would say. The first one is in Italy there's been the whole 100%, 110% bonus for this kind of project, and in the past 2 years. Basically, for people that don't know, maybe they're not from Italy, the government has been subsidizing projects in the solar, in general in the clean energy, solar, and sustainable energy part. Also, anyone can sort of do project in their houses, in their office, and the government subsidized that in some form or another. So there was a proliferation of companies doing this kind of job. And the real question is like, what's going to happen when this kind of starts cracking or ends? So whoever is left needs to have essentially like a very clear idea on how to survive and thrive, even without these government subsidies. So, beware of the project for sure. And secondly, as definitely connected is, retail investor also, they need to be extremely careful. This is like an unfiltered sort of project. There is some ranking, there is some way of giving valuation, but again, it's completely up to the retail investor. So just a word of warning.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Even though I believe that most of the projects historically, or at least the ones that I remember when I tried out the platform, came from not from the retail operations that were supported by the government, but from smaller projects from ESCO companies, so energy services companies. So actually setting up, a new photovoltaic field somewhere, and basically you start financing that, or a micro generator on a river or whatever. So historically, those were the projects. The interesting bit, I would say, is about the cost of capital in this case. So I'm under the impression that it is less expensive to list a project and raise funding from this platform than from traditional investors right now.
Yeah. It's a great option. It's great availability. It's definitely, if someone is powerful in marketing, definitely can tap into like the power of the crowdsourcing. But it's definitely something that need controls, but at the same time is extremely powerful for sure.
Yeah,
super interesting. All right, moving on. We are seeing one VC fund portfolio company being acquired by a big guy. So Strava acquiring Fatmap. Totally enjoyed you pointing out that. I'm a big fan of Fatmap. I didn't know before. I tried a few times while hiking. It's amazing. The maps are like extremely detailed. This is a deal that makes absolute sense for Strava. Strava is becoming like one of the major player into both trail, hiking, running ecosystem and communities. Great app for sure. And they've been keeping integrating interesting projects into the product. So that's basically a direct way to grow and implement the product itself. So from the TechCrunch article that you mentioned, they've been acquiring essentially like a number of different startups. So Strava acquired a community of professional athletes or semi-professional athletes, and that gives them access to this kind of ecosystem. And on the other side, they acquired a very interesting app, which is basically doing pre-hub workouts, which is essentially, I didn't know, there are workouts that prepare you for running. So, it's like rehab, but pre. So that's why it's called pre-hub. And that's the value proposition. And essentially they recommend special kind of stretching and workouts so you can run safely whenever you want. So they're really building something powerful. Fatmap definitely gives a big sense of what's going to be when it comes to mapping territories, and the details and precision and the user experience is pretty much insane. Super excited to see what's going to happen. And apparently the integration is coming this year.
I can see that you're really excited. I didn't think you would be so excited for the acquisition, because it's not strictly related to Italy, other than for the reason that P101 invested in Fatmap, because the company is not Italian and the founders are not Italian. But for some reason, P101 invested, and it seems that they got it right in a sense. So the price is undisclosed as far as I know, but hopefully it was a good return for them. Yeah. And nice to see an international investment going, possibly in a good direction.
Yeah, it would be interesting to actually extend this kind of reasoning and see how much international investors Italian VCs have. I have no idea what would be the number. I guess, of course, it's going to be like a minority. but it's definitely something maybe worth considering, because it's also part of how an Italian VC can actually bring superior return and be successful. So definitely something worth looking at.
That's a very good question. I would say not many, but different than zero. P101 in particular invested quite a bit in Spain in particular. So they also had an exit, I believe, but they invested in Calvin, they invested in a motorcycle marketplace. Sorry, I don't remember the names, but they did make a few investments in abroad. United Ventures as well.
Do we have
they are more like an international investor. We did a few with Primo, both with the digital and the space fund. I can't say they have the majority, but we are, trying to
like investment vehicles, like holding
the borders of Italy, and sometimes we do invest abroad. On the other side, I think that we can't say that we have a true pan-European or international investor in the VC area. Maybe United gets very close to that, but still I don't know whether I would say that.
We might not have special pan-European investors in general, but there are like boutique situations where smaller holding companies, they actually co-invest with bigger investors across the world. And we have like a very, I would say a significant part of the people, a significant part of the companies actually, which are expert that are active in this space. So it's definitely something to monitor, I would say.
Yeah, agree. So family offices, and, more agile investors are very more agile if they move on the market. So
definitely. All right, moving on. I was very interested about the profile of Mattia Barbarossa that you mentioned. That was great. For people that don't know, please follow the link from Nicolo's newsletter. It's basically, he's the founder of Sidereus Space, one company that Primo Space invested into, and definitely a profile worth mentioning. Definitely showing some interesting pattern of a great founder. That's definitely something super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty astonishing. He has to prove that his ideas will work, but he got so far, and that's very interesting, very important. Let's not forget he's 21 years old, launching a space tech startup with a lot of support from much older, I would say, researchers and operators. So that says something. So we'll see whether the project works, but the profile is interesting. So read it and take a look at the startup. So it's a very good story.
And to end up the session for today is Forno Brisa, very interestingly raising 3.4 million euro in crowdfunding, as being one of the biggest, if not the biggest, crowdfunding campaign so far. So
no, I mean this is just a feeling that I have. If you exclude those campaigns where there were vehicles raising capital to invest in other startups or crowdfunding, probably those raised more money. Inovia comes to mind, for example. But as a specific startup, that sounds like kind of a record-setting investment, and that's not a digital startup.
Yeah,
that's a bakery.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So we like digital product and everything, but like I don't know if paradoxically or not, the biggest raise from the crowd is for a coffee and bakery mix play. So very traditional, mom and pops, definitely successful, interesting branding, definitely a great concept, but non-digital. So that's interesting to notice.
Yep.
I agree.
And very good. The brand is very good.
The brand is good.
That is good. So the product is good. Not
this is a gourmet advice. It's not. We don't do it at investment advice, but that's a great gourmet advice.
Yeah. Say that I can say.
Awesome.
It's an interesting data point.
Awesome.
We
All right,
can our bread and sweets.
Exactly. Nick, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, Jack. Have a great day. See you in a week.